I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Keri Wilt. Keri is a speaker, writer, and heart cultivator with a soul full of sunshine who's on a mission to help you flourish. That's because not long ago, she looked down and discovered that her life had become an overplanted mess that was choking out her relationships, creativity, and purpose. That's when some soul-searching journal time and a late-night rereading of her great-great-grandmother's classic book, The Secret Garden, unearthed this well-tended life truth, that every locked-up, weed-filled, withering life can bloom and grow again with the help of a little magic. I am so excited to have her on the show today. Welcome to the show, Keri.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, this is going to be lovely. I was just telling Keri before we got on, I love following her. You need to head over to her Instagram page. It's such an authentic page with lots of advice and little life-giving tips, and I love it. So can you tell the listeners where we can find you on Instagram?
Yeah, it's The Well-Tended Life.
Okay.
Pretty simple and straightforward.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we'll include that in the show notes as well. So
Oh,
we'll have that. Well, I feel like this bio is fantastic, but I also feel like we're so much more than our bio. So can you tell us a
yeah.
little bit about who you are?
Yeah, well, I should always start with I am a mother. I'm a wife. My husband and I have been married 25 years. I have two kids. I'm on the edge of empty nesting, so that's kind of maybe my season, right? I'm coming out of my son is in college, and I have a daughter who is a senior this year. So I'm standing right on the edge of that empty nest, and looking forward to kind of what's happening in this next season. I'm a Texas girl. I love to grow zinnias in my garden. And I happen to have been lucky enough to be born into a family, and my great great grandmother happens to be the famous author of The Secret Garden and many other books as well.
Yeah.
So I have the joy as well of being the historical lecturer for Frances, and get to tell her stories.
I absolutely love that. And I love that you shared your favorite flower because it just seems so fitting.
There's something about zinnias that make me so happy. It's like they're just joy. But my favorite part, and really I tell people this all the time, like one of the reasons that I grow zinnias is that I love to color sort. And
Oh.
it's I'll pick them all at the same time, and then the next 10 minutes of sorting them into color blocks, it makes me so happy. It's such a simple thing. I think I'm creative and my brain is always going, and when I can create order, it's just like probably people rearranging their bookshelf, right?
Yeah.
Into color order and to genre order. There's something about it that is just so yummy, and that's what I love to do with my zinnias.
I love it. And it's so true, though. I went yesterday because we're having visitors come in tonight. And we have this awesome car wash by our house where they vacuum it out, they wipe everything down, they clean the windows inside and out. And it's amazing. I have three little kids. And I went yesterday and I hadn't been putting it off, but I was waiting until it was closer to the guests coming so my car wouldn't get trashed before they get here. And even just getting back in my clean car, I just felt lighter. Granted, I didn't do the organizing, but I was like, this is worth every penny of the $17 I just spent to step into a clean car and such a sigh of relief. It was one less thing on my to-do list.
Yeah, clutter in general is a really it's a big barrier
Yeah.
for our minds and our hearts, and we don't realize what it's really doing to us.
Yeah, I have a friend that I've met through this podcasting process, and she has introduced me to the concept of mental clutter, which I really never even thought about. But now that she has introduced me to that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am burdened by that some days.
Yeah.
At the Well-Tended Life, you talk a little bit about some of this, of kind of what serves you, what's not serving you, and how to identify where and when to let things go.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all of our lives need lots of pruning and often, right? Because constantly things are coming at us and storms are blowing in. But also for me, the biggest thing that clutters up our lives are what I call weeds. And for me, weeds are the things that keep popping up in our lives over and over and over again. Like if you probably know it's a weed when you have said to yourself, "Am I still struggling with this one thing?" And the biggest thing is that weeds never go away. Like we all have weeds. They just are supposed to be managed, right? It's the thing, it's kind of our thorn, I guess, right? And so knowing and identifying those weeds and knowing when they get out of control. Like so for me, my biggest weed is the weed of busyness.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when it starts to get out of control, I know it because my calendar is over full. I'm exhausted and I don't know why, right? Like you're like, why am I so tired? And then you go back and you look at your calendar, you're like, oh, well, this is why, right?
Yeah.
And I get irritable. And so I'm always on the lookout, matter of fact, daily in my journal about like, am I seeing signs of my weeds coming up? Where am I spotting those? And then just kind of gently reminding myself to, hey, maybe not put so many things on my calendar this week. And maybe it's time to pull back. Maybe I should have said no when I said yes to this commitment. And maybe it's okay for me to back out. So
Yeah. Do you find some maybe less frustration or comfort in the fact that you know what your weed is? So when you see it pop up, you're like, okay, I've tended this weed before. I can do it again.
100%, right? Like experience and overcoming, like do it again and again. But also, I know it's a part of me, right? It's
Yeah.
not something I feel shameful about. It's a piece of me and it's a part of me that, needs to be managed. I mean, anything can be either our detriment or our superpower, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of balance. Fun is awesome, right? Like we want to have lots of fun in our lives, but when you spend your life only chasing fun and not doing the hard things that are in front of you, or it's like one margarita is good, but maybe six is not a great idea,
Yeah.
right? So it's a matter of just it's being aware of it. And really when I write down in my journal on the daily basis, I'm like, I'm not writing it down to be like, oh, you did this. I'm writing it down to be like, you, I'm putting you on notice.
Yeah.
And just that awareness helps you go forward. Because
Okay.
I think that's really probably the biggest problem is most people are walking unaware
Yeah.
that these things are tripping them up. And then they're exhausted and they're overwhelmed and they can't figure out why. And, they haven't made room in their day to figure out, hey, what do I need? What do I need to water? What do I need to tend to?
Yeah. And I've been noticing that lately too, is I'm kind of calling it mental gymnastics. Like even just the mental gymnastics of maintaining three tiny humans schedule plus my own plus everything else we have going in our life, right? That I feel like is where, and it goes to exactly your point of an overbooked calendar, and I'm not realizing the mental toll it's taking, and that's why I'm exhausted when my kids go to bed at 8. I'm like, okay, I'm tired now.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
con
And, but also give yourself some grace. You're a mama of three.
yeah,
Like that alone with no calendar, no nothing, it's a time when, honestly, if you're doing it right, you are kind of exhausted at the end of the day. Like, right. You put it all out there. Like
yeah,
being tired at the end of the day is not the issue. It's when it goes past that. Like you're not taking care of yourself. You're not pouring into yourself.
yeah.
And I know you get up early in the morning and you have kind of your morning time to fill back up. And if as long as we're doing that, we can make it through.
Yeah. And that's how I've realized that that is what I need to be a better mom in the day is to have a quiet window to just have a cup of coffee by myself before the chaos begins. And that's simple and it's easy to do. I
Yes,
mean, I don't want to sometimes get up when the alarm goes off, but I know I need that. So,
right.
well, and then so you've mentioned a couple of times your journaling practice. So is that for
Yeah.
you what you have found is the best way to maybe start looking at your own life? And I'm just thinking for the listeners, maybe a practical tip that they could take away of where they can start.
Yes. Yeah. Because what it does is it makes room for you, right? Makes room for your thoughts, makes room for doing the work. And my journal practice isn't like your grandma's journal practice of like, I'm not writing down what I ate yesterday or who I'm mad at. like really I have a very specific process where every day I go in and I read, I reflect, and I weed, seed, and water.
Okay.
And so I read, which is for me, it's daily devotionals and the Bible app and things like that. But really, it's about putting something in me that is good for me, right?
Okay.
So it could be an encouraging word. It could be a book that you're reading. It could be a podcast that you're listening to, but putting something good in me first.
Yeah.
And then I reflect on the day before to spot the joy, goodness, and growth. Because for me, that's that. Uh, when you're going through a storm, it's hard to see the joy, goodness, and growth in your life. But when you do it on a daily basis, you are trained to find it. And I can look back and go, it's been there every single day. Right. And
Even in the storm, even with the storm
even
brewing.
in the storm,
Yeah.
even in the storm. And so I do that. And then I weed. So I look back on the day before and I go, hey, were there any times that I got upset or I felt overwhelmed or, I had too many margaritas, whatever it happens to be. You're like, what are there any signs that maybe my weeds are getting out of control? And I just write it down and then I move on. And then I seed, which is I read and write down the things that I want to grow.
Okay.
Just keep it top of mind, right?
Yeah.
Because so many times we're like, the beginning of the year, we set all of these goals and then we're not reminding ourselves every way, this is the thing that I want to do. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to grow. And then I water. The last thing I do is I water. And I just had a couple things on my list that say, these are the things that I'm going to pour into today. It's like my intentions, right?
Okay.
I'm going to pour into my kid. Like, so for example, today, my daughter, we're taking senior pictures, right?
I love it.
And so I'm reminding myself in my journal, be present, be there, supportive of her, and so on her today. And it's really simple, but it's a daily practice that really me growing and moving forward and not stuck in the same.
I like that because to your point of even if you're identifying something, oh, here's that weed again. There's no shame
Yeah.
associated with it. Like you said, you're just identifying it. And that
Yeah.
alone, that awareness, like you said, could probably help you. But then also, you're kind of hitting everything, right? I mean, they always, I feel like I've heard the gratitude journals and doing that and how important that is. And that probably changes your perspective shift, right? Of to notice the
Yeah.
little things or to your point of noticing in the storms. And I think that's huge. Back to what you were saying earlier, is we can look at something as, oh, here's that weed again, and this is bad. Or we can change our perspective to it of, okay, well, it's making me realize it so I can change and I can go forward.
Yeah. Well, and that's what all pain and storms are about,
Hmm.
right? If they're about stopping you and making you reflect on, what's my role? What am I, what can I do in this? And sometimes we don't look at it that way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We look
I
at
feel like
it's
I'm always like kicking and screaming, like, no, 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 I don't want to go through this. Like, I know this is going to hurt.
yeah,
And now my older years, I feel like I have switched, like this pain's gonna have a purpose. What am I to learn from this?
always. Always.
So,
Yeah. And it's not always obvious in it. One of the things that I try to do once a year, and as a matter of fact, I teach a workshop in January in the end of December, and I basically reflect and prep, and we look back
yeah,
specifically at all the storms of the year. Like, right, we write down every single hard thing that happened on one side of the paper, and then to the right, you write down the good that came out of it.
yeah,
What did you learn? What did you do? What are you doing differently today? Are you more grateful? I lost my dad this last year, and that definitely goes in the hard category.
yeah,
But also, like, I am living today with a vim and a vigor that is fueled by the, like, man, I don't know how many days I have
yeah,
left. Our days are numbered. Like, I get today, I get this moment with you, but I don't know if I get the next moment. And so I'm super thankful for that.
yeah.
But it helps you remember every time you're going through something.
It's interesting because I lost my dad in 2010 and I had the same lesson out of his death was
Yeah.
and I still live by that. Like with my husband being in the military, it's like, you know what? We had the opportunity to move to Sicily. It's like, let's do it. Like we literally never know how much time we here or have here on this earth. And so it's it is still a lesson that's fruition, 14 years later.
Oh, love it.
So, well, also, I did see on your website you have a workshop coming up. Can you tell the listeners about it?
Yes, we are actually going to be doing this particular program. It's a group experience and masterclass called Cultivate You.
Okay.
Basically, a life tending masterclass where we go in. It's a 6 week session. We go in once a week, and I'm gonna teach everybody how to look at their life as a garden. When I read The Secret Garden, I was a weed filled withering mess. Like I had said yes to everything. I was literally broken. I could barely even see straight. And I read the words in The Secret Garden where Mary had just found this. She had just found the garden, and it was abandoned and locked up. And I was like, oh, I resemble that. But then she said to Dickens, she said, is it dead? And he lovingly said, um, not yet, but it will be soon if no one cares for it.
Yeah.
And oh, yeah, right.
Chills over here.
And but not only so in that moment I was like, okay, clearly I need to start tending to myself. There needs to be something here. And Mary throughout the book like literally laid out the examples of what we do. Like, right, you get up every day, you turn the key, you open the door, you clear the path, you make room for growth, you enlist your friends, you pull the weeds, you
You
water what
laugh.
matters,
I feel like she
you
laughs.
laugh,
Yeah.
play, yeah, you enjoy yourself, you eat good food, and all of those things. And really there's so many tools and life lessons in there, and that's what this Cultivate You is. It is a master class on looking at your life as a garden and making room for growth. And I mean, basically loading everybody's like life garden toolbox, for lack of better terms, tool shed,
Yeah.
maybe that would be a better term, with all sorts of like perennial tools that you'll go back to, like even the reflect and prep. Like we'll look back on the storms and identify the growth. But because here's the deal, like life is in seasons, right? And,
Yeah.
and the seasons shift on a dime. Like you could break your leg tomorrow and that's a new season
Yeah.
because you now are having to rely on somebody else, or you go through a divorce, or happy things like a new job or a baby or something else like that. And these are that will help you in those transition times, but on a daily basis. And it's really all rooted in the journal process. So that being said, we'll have a spring session that starts in April, but then there'll be one in September.
Oh,
Because
awesome.
for those who have kids, like September's a new year,
Hmm.
right? Like my girlfriend and I always
It
talked
rolls
about like
over.
I don't know why everybody sets goals in January, like because September when the school for moms especially, like that is the time that we like really can get down and get some stuff done because the
Yeah.
kids are in school. So we'll have one in September and then we'll do another one in January.
Awesome.
So yeah,
So, and it's all online, so they don't have to live local
all
to you.
online,
Okay.
all virtual. Yeah. And
Perfect.
the best thing for me is that this isn't one of those courses where do all this homework and lots of work. Like we're going to walk through all of these exercises and workbooks, and like literally encourage throughout the process. So I'm super excited.
I love it. I'm thinking of, to our garden reference, you're going to get in and you're going to get dirty right away. So, like,
Yes. Yeah, but I mean that's kind of the point, right? Like
yeah,
this is a course for people who are ready to dig deeper,
yeah,
uh, bring everybody and everything else but themselves, who can't even maybe even remember what their dreams and their gifts were,
yeah.
because we buried it under like normal stuff, like right, like you're a mom of three, like you're burying it under Cheerios and just like survival mode.
And it happens slow. I found myself there like a year and a half ago, which is why the podcast is now a thing because I was like, I have to do something for me in this chaos.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
happened so slowly. I never saw the backslide into it. And then one day my husband was like, go do something. I've got the kids today. And I was like, I literally don't even know what I like to do anymore. Like I just had this
yeah.
panic. Like I don't know me. I don't know what I like to do. You're telling me I have time. I don't even know what to do with it. Like, and I was just of course I started crying because that's like my nature. But I was
Yeah.
like, I don't even know what to do with myself. This is crazy.
No. And that's really for me, that's why the journal process, that's why the little bit of time every single day, because that doesn't happen overnight either, right? Like you don't just all of a sudden go from like I don't know to like ding 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 ding.
No.
It's literally the slowly removing of the weeds. It's the pruning away of the down branches from past storms. It's all of those things, and it's over time of getting quiet that you start to hear those things.
Yeah. And even I've tried some things for a few months and then I'm realizing that doesn't fill my cup, right? That doesn't grow my
Yeah.
garden how I'm wanting it. So I'm realizing, nope, I need to go back to the drawing board and I need to listen. Again, I need to figure out something else to try. And I guess it's a trial and error process too. So,
Well, and that's what gardening is, right? Like you put something in this corner and it doesn't grow well, and then you're like, yeah, well, maybe it doesn't fit my area, right?
yeah.
So then you got to pull that thing out and you got to try something new next year. And but also like what works for you in this season might not work in the next.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. Like sometimes some people are out there just like still trying to use the same tools that they've been working with in the past, and like their life season is completely different.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's the other reason for this course is like just filling you with all sorts of tools that you'll use at different times throughout your life, um, and to switch it up, because if it's not working, like move on.
Yeah. And I think that's been a great benefit of motherhood, right? Is you have less, you realize how little time you have. And it's like, that doesn't work for me and I just got to scrap it. Where I think before I would have maybe held on for longer to, well, maybe, or I'll see if this is going to change. But now I'm like, I just don't even have the time to do that. So scratch on to something else.
Yes, 100%.
Well, listeners, you can check out Cultivate You. Maybe we all could join your cohort in September. Because this,
Awesome.
um,
Love it.
well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's
Yeah.
talk about who you are as a reader and what type of genres do you enjoy reading?
Okay, so here's what I'll tell you. It's an interesting thing. I didn't really grow up like I'm not a voracious reader.
Okay.
I grew up with a mom who has dyslexia,
Okay.
and I really didn't know that until later on in life. But so my mom wasn't sitting at the end of the
Yeah.
bed with me reading. So I really didn't grow up with that. And it's interesting because I did grow up knowing about my great great grandmother, but it was still like I assumed you had a great great grandmother that had was famous or did something or whatever. It was just kind of normal in
Yeah.
our house. So that being said, today the kind of reader I am is an audiobook reader.
Love it. Me too.
Because where books and even podcasts fit in my life is when I'm out on a walk or I'm in the car. For me, sitting down to read a book is very difficult in this season. I've got just lots of things going, and I try to read at night, but I make it about 2 pages in, and then I'm out like a light.
Yeah.
So then I have to read the same 2 pages over and over and over
That makes me
again.
think a life well lived so that you're, 2 pages and you're
Yes.
sleeping. And that's fine because I do it too, right?
Yeah.
It's normal.
Yeah. And as far as like what do I read, I'm kind of like half and half. So I love like self-help and that kind of stuff because I'm always wanting to grow and learn and seeing what's out there. But then I'm like then I go back to fiction, and then I go
Yeah.
back, like I kind of go every other. It just kind of depends on maybe where my heart is leading me at the time. But I like both.
Yeah, I always think of that as like a mood reading, right? Like you have these two books going on, and what are you feeling that day? Are you feeling more a little like I want to learn something, or more a little I want to just relax into a story? And
Exactly.
so, well, and then in your busyness, I guess you've already kind of answered this question. It sounds like you do a lot of audiobooks to fit it in to your life.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And
Awesome.
if listeners think that's cheating, then that's okay.
It is
I'm not
100%
considered
not cheating. I did a post about this recently because I'm like, you spend just as much time with a book as you do if you sat down and read a physical copy. Like, I do not believe that
Yeah.
at all. You're still digesting the story, you're still falling in love with it, you're still spending time with it. I mean, that is all the things of reading. So,
Yes.
Okay, and then you have also been so gracious to bring a book flight with you today. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you went about choosing these books?
Yes. Okay. Well, clearly I have to choose books from my great great grandmother. I have to, but I wanted to. And so I chose three books. And actually, unknowingly, I chose three books that were written within basically a 7 years time of my great great grandmother. So just
Wow.
to give you some perspective, Frances had two kids. One died of tuberculosis at 16. The other was my great grandfather. He had two children. My aunt never had any, my great aunt never had any children. And then my grandmother, and then my grandmother had my mother, and my mother had me. So that is
Wow.
the that's the direct lineage. But Frances was like writers of her time, wrote more books than the big boys, made more money than the big boys.
Which is amazing for her time.
Crazy.
Yeah.
She wrote over 50 books, 1,000 short stories, and 15 plays.
I didn't realize all of that. Wow.
Well, it's crazy. So five like New York Times top bestsellers, but she really most she's known today. People think of her as a children's writer, but really 95% of what she wrote was romance.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, most of hers were love stories. And so it's very interesting. So so I chose three books. I chose, of course, The Secret Garden
Yeah.
because it played a major impact in my life. And who knew, right, that Frances would tuck those seeds into the pages of The Secret Garden for her great great granddaughter to find someday.
That's what I always find so impressive about authors is how they can sprinkle in such anecdotes about life and amongst telling a fictional story. And
Yeah,
it's so amazing to me how life-giving a book can be from that.
yeah. Well, and I think you write about what you know,
Yeah,
right? She said she had been writing it her whole life in her mind, and really, like I said, it was she died in 24, so this was the end, kind of, it was like last quarter of her writing career,
sure.
which also meant like she'd been through some things,
Hmm.
right? She lost her son, she'd been through two divorces, she had tended a garden of her own, she had dealt with grief, and so all of those things, I think, especially as an author gets older, I think you just start weaving more and more. So I think for me, I think that's one of the reasons why that book had so much oomph in it and so much just life-giving force, because of where she was in her life.
Yeah. That is the exact type of book I've talked about on the show before. Because I have a lot of mom friends that will ask me, like, oh, my kid's reading this fluff book. I hate reading it with them. I'm like, there are so many books and literature out there that you and your child can both enjoy. And it's because of books like The Secret Garden that I just reread it this week because I wanted it to be fresh on my mind before we talked today. And I had the chills multiple times as reading it because I couldn't believe how like the messages just smacked me in the face of like I needed to hear that. And I'm like, would my kid pick that up? I don't know, but I did.
I have a friend who read it when she was like 13-ish. So like total like boy crazy age. And then she read it again when she was 40. And she called me and she was like, Keri, where is the love story? And I was like, what are you talking about? She was like, I remember this book thinking it was a love story, that Mary was in love with Dickon or Colin or whatever. And I was like, no. And when you read through what's going on in your life at the time, right? So
Yeah.
today you read it through a mom who has three kids,
Yeah.
and you read it through that filter. Somebody may have read it when they were going through a divorce. Somebody may have read it when they were I have people who read it when they had a really terrible childhood, and The Secret Garden was this place where they would go outside and they would read it under a tree, and when things would get hard, they would go back to that feeling of being in the secret garden because it
Yeah.
felt safe, it felt, so it just you get from books what you're going through at the time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I've had a couple people come on and talk about similar, you're not reading in a vacuum. that you have all
No.
these external influences that you're showing up to that book with that day. And that is why it can hit you differently. Or even life experience, right? That from
Yeah.
13 to 40, a lot has happened in your life. And so you're viewing it differently.
100%. 100%.
Okay. All right. So the first book we have is The Secret Garden. I guess maybe
Yes.
we should give the listeners a little blurb if they have not read it, maybe what it's
Sure.
about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I always tell people that The Secret Garden is it's about loss and fear being turned on its head by hope and magic. For me, that's like the snippet. But at the end of the day, The Secret Garden is about a girl who lost her parents in the cholera, and she's sent to live with her uncle and in this big mansion, and there is an abandoned locked up garden, and there are reasons for that, also dealing with loss and grief. And she basically finds this garden and loves it back to life and loves herself back to life in the same process. But it's interesting because I think also most people, if you ask them what The Secret Garden is about, they'll talk, it's about the garden, it's about, this blooming thing. But really that book's about grief.
yeah.
It's about how three really different people deal with the grief and loss of mothers, fathers, and wives.
Yeah.
And people seem to forget that part.
Yeah. And I loved just that what Hope was able to do, right? And you're going to see this as you read the story is the story, three different characters and what Hope can do for them. And that for me was just cherry on the top, chef's kiss when I finished.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's so good. And if you haven't read it, I'm actually really surprised. I'm actually doing a book club right now with Melissa Gilbert. Do you know who that is? Like Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so she has a brand called Modern Prairie, and they have a book club, and we're doing a book club for The Secret Garden. And
Okay.
I'm shocked at how many people have read it.
Yeah.
I'm like, is this your first time? And you forget. And so if you haven't read it, please go out. It's one of those that you're going to want to have in your heart.
Yes, parents, even if you're not parents, like this, like I said, this book
Yeah,
hit
yeah, yeah.
so many notes for me. And yeah, so this is the exact book I'm talking about, parents, when I talk about there's books for you and your kid that you can both enjoy together.
Oh yeah, like multi generations. I always say like from 7 to 70.
Yeah.
Like like grandma will love it. Like everybody loves it. It's one of those.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, what's the second book you brought today?
So a little princess, because, and I always tell people, so Mary is the character in The Secret Garden, and literally The Secret Garden opens up with basically like Mary is the most like sour, bitter, like she's kind of she's not a very nice person in the book. And I am attracted to light and love. And so I love Sarah from Princess. Like she is if a person could be my spirit animal, Sarah from A Little Princess is my spirit animal.
Love it.
And so Sarah is a little girl whose mother had died and father was going away and has put her in a girls' school, like a boarding school. And he ends up dying in the process. She loses her fortune and her place in the school and has to basically become a maid in the school that she was then a pupil in.
Mm-hmm.
And what Sarah teaches us is just about kindness and generosity and always having a positive outlook on no matter what your life looks like at any time. And it's a sweet story. I think everybody should strive to be and have a little bit of Sarah in us.
I love that. So where was this written in the chronological order? Is this after The Secret Garden or before?
So no, actually A Little Princess was first. Little Princess was 1905.
Okay.
And so about 6 years difference
Okay.
than The Secret Garden. So, and it was very popular. For me, the coolest part about the secret about A Little Princess, though, is Frances got to write it 3 different times. And it's interesting. People always ask me about, like, aren't you upset that the movie doesn't match the book? Like, right. And in The Secret Garden or whatever it is, like, oh, they took these liberties. And I always go back to the story about A Little Princess because Frances knew what it was to turn something into a play.
Yeah.
Like, she knew what happened. And art is always changing. Like, you won't meet any artist that doesn't, like, let go of a piece and then go, I wish I would have done this, and I if I had it back I would do this. Frances would go to the mailbox and drop off her manuscript, and she said as soon as she walked away, new characters would start like appearing, right? And she'd be like, you're too late. Like, if you wanted to be in this book, you needed to be here earlier.
Yeah.
So, right. So A Little Princess was actually originally written. It was called Sarah Crew, or What Happened at Miss Minchin's. And the publishers, it was very popular. So the publishers asked her to create a play out of it. Well, she created a play. And when she created the play, of course, she had to change the format because of all the things. And but new characters arrived to her when she created the play. And the play was so crazy popular that they asked her to rewrite the play as a book. And then again, the third time through, even more major characters, like major characters that you're like, I can't believe this character wasn't in the first book,
Yeah.
showed up in the third rendition. And so just being allowing something to develop and change and move. um she it's what it wouldn't be what it was today if that didn't happen, right?
Yeah. And I can totally
um
see what you're saying of, you as an artist, this story has been marinating in your mind, and then you go back and you actually get a chance to put some more touches on it, and how that would be, again, something you've marinated in your mind, how you could see, oh, this might be a fun little storyline if we add this character, or this could be a fun addition to
yes.
it. And so I could totally see how that happens. But I never realized the backstory in that it was rewritten 3 times.
Oh yeah, it's super cool. I don't know many artists that have ever gotten a chance to do
Yeah.
that. um and so but and
Especially after it's been printed, right? I think before it's been
yes,
printed, you have that absolutely, but the
yes,
liberty to do that after is, yeah, very rare.
very rare.
Okay. All right. So that was A Little Princess. And then
Yes.
what's the last book you brought today?
3 books in general that I brought today all have one little um, like thread that goes through all of them. So if you go back to The Secret Garden, in The Secret Garden, it says one of the most famous quotes. It says, "One of the people began to find out in the last century was that thoughts, just mere thoughts, are as powerful as electric batteries, as good for one as sunlight is, or as bad for one as poison." Right. And then if you go to Little Princess, one of the main themes there is what you have to do with your mind when your body is miserable is to make it think of something else.
Yeah.
And then, so to stick with that one and introduce everybody to a book that you have probably never heard of, from Frances. And it's actually a fairy tale. It's called The Land of the Blue Flower. There's an audio version out there that's
Okay.
a great little, and it's like 56 meg is the total. It's a very
Wow.
simple read.
Okay.
And I would put it in the category of like The Alchemist,
Okay.
or like Who Moved
Changing.
My Cheese. The Land of the Blue Flower is about basically a king and his wife. The king dies in battle. The wife is giving birth to their son, and she is dying. And she asks the Ancient One to come and raise her son up in the hills amongst the stars and the trees and the flowers and the birds and nature, until he's ready to come down and reign. And while he's up there, he is taught by outside by taught by all of the things in nature, and which is just such a sweet story. But then he comes down to rule, and he's exposed to people who are angry at their navel, and who are drinking in the bars, and who are squabbling and all sorts of things. He basically makes a demand that everyone in the kingdom is required to plant these blue flowers and tend and grow them throughout the land, and all land was given to them. And so it's this lovely story about what happens when someone distracted by tending to how that takes away the bad that was happening, and all of that. And really the crux of that one is the quote from that book is, if you fill your mind with a beautiful thought, there will be no room in it for an ugly one.
I love that. I love that. And I have not heard of this title, so I'm very intrigued. I'm excited.
No, I mean, it's a tiny little,
Okay.
just a little tiny little book. It's so sweet. And it's funny, I went looking because it doesn't actually say in the book anywhere what kind of flower it is.
Okay.
The illustrator of the book chose something that looks like a bluebell.
Okay.
Evidently it does have this sweet, beautiful smell. It's very prolific, and probably would be very prolific in England and cottage gardens and things like that. So it makes sense that she probably would have chosen that. But also, I don't know. I think that's probably what it was.
Okay. All right. So that was The Land of the Blue Flower.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're talking about this, it's just that shift of your mindset. I am actually a physical therapist by trade. Was my first go in the career world. And there's a study out, and this was done a long time ago, where they had put patients in the hospital by a window versus not by the window. Have you heard of this study? And
No.
But just how even having that window view sped up their healing process and time in hospital and outlook, like all of the metrics that they measured were vastly different than patients that were not given a bed next to a window in the hospital. So I think of that as like this moment of having this bright window there, or an outlook, right? Just even a positive, sunny, or some hope, some small sliver of hope within your mindset. So
absolutely.
how I love to end our show here is with our bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of questions, so you can answer these quick. Are you a rereader?
Yes.
Okay.
The War of Art. I don't know if you've read that one, but it's one that I go back to time and time again.
Okay. I'll have to take a look. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
Well, The Secret Course. I mean, I can't not choose that one.
I figured that would be it, but that was normally in there. And then where's your favorite place to read?
In my ears.
Okay. Yep. Love it.
And on my walk.
Walking out in nature.
Or really, I will sit and read a book if I am on vacation, like sitting on a beach. Like I can blow through books when I have nothing else to do, right? To then just sit. So I would probably say, if not on an audiobook, then on a beach.
Okay. Awesome. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
So what I'm reading right now actually is called I See You by Amy Kemp.
Okay.
It's a guide for women to make more, have more, and be more without more work. Right. As I said earlier, like busy is my week. And so, she really, she's got some great insight. I'm only like maybe 2 chapters in, but I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that sounds like a really necessary read for a lot of us. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious, and I appreciate all you've given me.
Oh my gosh. Well, I am so excited to be here. Thanks for letting me share.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Keri Wilt and her book flight of Frances Hodgson's Burnett's books and their life-giving wisdom. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. Now you can leave us a voicemail at Bookish Flights. We'd love to hear what books you've loved from the show, what episodes have been your favorite, or a guest you've loved hearing from. Head on over to www.speakpipe.com/bookishflights and leave us a voicemail that we will be sure to air on the show. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.